Today is the last day before the Beyond the Bandlewood expansion goes live, which means we got our last round of reveals. Today was Ziggs and some supporting cards. By the time that some of you are watching this, you will likely have seen the entire set because there's an early access event going on. And I do have access to the early access event, but I will not be able to stream or make content until much later tonight. So if you want to swing by my Twitch channel later on, you could probably catch me live checking out the new stuff. But I still wanted to do the last video talking about the reveals that we did get today, which means we're going to talk about Ziggs. Ziggs is a 3-cost 3/4 with the Yordle tag and is Shurima and Bandle City, which is potentially a shakeup. I think when you think of Ziggs, you usually think like Piltover and Zon, but apparently they sent him out to the desert for testing out his explosives. I don't know, but he is Shurima in Bandle City. He also says on attack, deal 1 to my blocker and the enemy nexus. Now this is a skill that gets put on the stack, which means you can counter it with such effects. The level up condition is you've destroyed 4 or more allied landmarks this game, so very clearly in the similar vein to Xerath, but not quite the same. Ziggs here is a bit more aggressive. A 3/4 for 3 is pretty solid stats, and we get this deal 1 damage when attacking, and so even if you don't level Ziggs up, this could be a nice aggressive unit for Shurima, and we know that Shurima needed more proactive aggressive units, so of course why not give them Ziggs. Now when Ziggs levels up, we get that standard +1/+1, so it becomes a 3-cost 4/5, but it also now says on attack I deal 2 to my blocker and the enemy nexus. When an allied landmark is destroyed, deal 2 to the enemy nexus, and so we get kind of an Ezreal effect. It's not as easy to pull off in terms of just spamming spells, but we do also still have that on attack effect, so you're going to get that damage in one way or the other. And I think that this is a nice aggressive option. Yesterday's video with Xerath, I was talking about how I kind of wanted to play a bit more of an aggressive option with Chip, and I think that we can do that with Ziggs, and so I'm kind of looking forward to that option. Now when you're looking at the screen here, you see the short fuse. This is just the kind of card that represents the skill. You can see skill right on it. So when Ziggs attacks, this is what ends up on the stack. And then we also have the champion spell, which is Bouncing Bomb. This is a 3-cost slow spell. It is from Bandle City, and it says deal 2 to an enemy or deal 1 to 2 enemies. And as we know, if there's a champion spell, there's also a regular version, which we can see over here on the next graphic. So Bouncing Bomb, I think, is actually pretty solid when you're trying to clear the path for your aggressive units, assuming that's the way that you are playing Ziggs. I don't know that you're going to run the regular version alongside your Ziggs, but if you've got a Ziggs in play and you're trying to free up some space for attackers, then Bouncing Bomb's not terrible. Now, just like with Xerath, obviously, if we have a champion where we want to destroy our own landmarks, we need some targets for that, ways to create that. And so we also get Inventive Chemist. This is a 1-cost 2/1. It is in Bandle City, but it also has the Yordle tag. And this says when I'm summoned, summon a Scrappy Bomb. Scrappy Bomb is a 1-cost landmark that has countdown of 3, or when I'm destroyed, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So we make a 2/1 and we get an eventual 1 damage to the nexus. I think this card is actually fine in that kind of proactive deck. So because Ziggs is both Shurima and Bandle City, if we wanted to go the Bandle City route and then still pair that with Targon, we could have this alongside Chip as our openers. I don't know which one is going to end up being best, whether it's Bandle City or Shurima. If we want to pair it with Targon and go that route, going to take some testing, but at least we have options now, which is not something that we really could say before this expansion. We also have Bomber Twins. This is a 2-cost 3/2. It is a Yordle. This is in Bandle City and Shurima, so we get that flexibility whichever way we go. And this says when I'm summoned, create a random landmark that costs 2 or less in hand, which is just nice card advantage for a deck like this. Even if we don't find something that we're particularly thrilled about, we still get a cheap option that we can play, we can develop, and then we can blow up with the likes of Ziggs or some other effect. So we really like this card. This is, in many ways, it's kind of like the Blue Sentinel, but for these other regions where you don't really care as much about the landmark, you just care that you are creating a landmark. Now you have to pay for this one, whereas with Blue Sentinel, we just get to summon it, but we do also get that kind of nice slide in factor of maybe this is a landmark that helps us, right? We could get something that generates additional cards for us. We could get the removal landmark from Targon, whatever the case may be. So I like Bomber Twins, and I think that this will absolutely fit in this archetype. The last card on this screen is actually Safety Inspector, because that Inspection Past is a card that is created by the Safety Inspector. And I love this card. I love the design of it. It just makes me giggle. This is a 6-cost 6/6 Yordle only in Bandle City, but on round start you create an Inspection Past in hand. Inspection Past is a fleeting slow spell that costs 0, but you destroy an allied landmark to deal 3 to anything. So you can use this as removal, or you can use this as direct damage to a Nexus. And so if you're using this on a Scrappy Bomb, for example, and you're targeting the Nexus, well, now your 6/6 for 6 is also generating 4 Nexus damage, which is not bad. Like, this could potentially be a closer in this kind of Ziggs style deck. I'm a little hesitant that it's a 6/6 for 6, because that's kind of like the top end of the curve, but I could see us running this as like a one of. Kind of wish it had at least one keyword, but beggars can't be choosers. And so that's it for the cards on this screen. And we are moving on to the final screen of the final reveal of the season. We're going to start by talking about the Arsenal, which is a massive Yordle, but it's also probably a meme. This is an 8-cost 8/6 Yordle. It's only in Bandle City, and so naturally it's an 8-cost follower, so we're going to make all those jokes. But it does say, I have a random keyword for each allied landmark you've destroyed this game, which could be really strong. If we destroy 4 or 5 landmarks by the time this thing comes down, we could get a heck of a high roll. We could get something like Overwhelm and Quick Attack and Challenger, and then we are maybe okay with having spent 8 mana on this. Or we could get like Spell Shield and Elusive and Lifesteal, and we use that to stabilize. We are potentially getting like Celestial level endgame value, which in the right deck could be a pretty big deal. Where I see this fitting, if it does fit at all, would be in the Xerath deck. So if we are playing Xerath and maybe Ziggs together, or Xerath with Bandle City, and I think that's the real trick here, is that we have to run Bandle City in order to get this card. But if we were playing it with Xerath and we're playing a slower, more controlling landmark build where we're going later into the game, this very well could be the finisher that we are looking for, because we could get an insane number of keywords on a relatively large body for the cost. So how many keywords is going to be required for this to always be good? I don't know. There are still some bad ones that we could roll. And while getting a bunch of keywords is nice, if we play an 8/6 and it gets chump blocked by a 1/1 and we get no extra value, we're not very happy. So we do have to have a certain critical mass. I think that at least getting to 4 or more, where we have again leveled that Xerath in all likelihood, or leveled Ziggs, that's where we want to be. But it is funny, right? It's a giant Yordle that has the potential to just be a stomper. And so I like it. I want to play around with it at least a little bit. Whether or not it finds a competitive home, who knows? But Explosive Minefield is another card that was revealed. This is a 1-cost landmark from Bandle City. And this says, when I'm summoned or destroyed, stun the strongest enemy. So naturally, of course, we're going to talk about Yasuo, right? No, I'm not. Yasuo and Bandle City is going to be the same meme that Yasuo is with everything else. What I like about this is that this gives you a nice, very cheap tempo play, because when you play it, you stun something. And then also when you destroy it, you stun something. And so really, when you look at this and you compare it to something like Guile, it is kind of embarrassing for Guile. Granted, this is only the strongest, but most of the time that's exactly what you want to stun. So I don't know. I feel like this is better than Guile. Whether it's good enough to be run, we'll have to wait and see. It's a great target for blowing up. And in an aggressive deck where you might want to remove a blocker, and then if you're playing an effect where you also want to kill a landmark and get that trigger and remove another blocker, we could see that be very, very good potentially. We could also just see this card never see play, but what I like most about it is that we get options. Whenever you're getting new cards, and in this case we're getting a whole new region as well, I think what you want is to just have a bunch of options so you can kind of figure out what you're supposed to do with the region, what's your region identity, what works, what doesn't, and then we can be a bit more critical from there. So at a minimum, I just like that the card exists so that we have options, but I feel like we're not going to see a ton of competitive play. but we'll have to wait and see. It might be meta dependent. Again, if we're constantly needing to shut down Ruin Runners through Spell Shield, because you have to remember, this being a landmark and a summon effect, it does go through Spell Shield. So if we're looking for ways that we can slow down Ruin Runner, we could see this be like a secret tech. I don't want to write it off completely, but like I said before, we're also going to say this is pretty meta dependent, and it's not going to be like an auto include in every list. And speaking of not an auto include in every list, we're going to talk about Mega Inferno Bomb. This is a 7-cost slow spell from Bandle City. It says deal 1 to all enemies, then do it again. And many folks are going to look at this and they're going to say, why does this card exist? This feels like a significantly worse Avalanche, but there are some things to consider. 1, Avalanche hits everything. This only hits enemies. 2, this is really good with any sort of damage buff. A single keg, a funsmith, whatever, is going to amplify this to deal 2 and then deal 2 again. And so with a single buff, you're jumping from dealing 2 to everything to dealing 4 to everything. We do also have some detriments though, because it is 1 twice. We are extra hard countered by Ranger's Resolve if we don't have any sort of damage buffing going on, which is a problem. We do also have to remember that this is a Bandle City card, and so we might not even have access to Avalanche, and so it might not even need the comparison. But again, naturally, that's the comparison people are going to make. So what I think this is potentially good for would be something like a weird Bandle City keg control, where you can stack kegs and then you could spend 7 for a one-sided board wipe. And there is some potential there. I kind of want to play around with it. I also would like to point out that because it does it twice, this also should be kind of eating spell shields, or at least eating a spell shield and then allowing you to go again, because it does it twice. So my understanding is it would go through those. It at a minimum will go through barrier, but I believe even though it's 1 spell, that this should probably go through spell shield. We'll have to test that as well, but we can see what it's trying to do. It's trying to reward you for knowing how mechanics work and then kind of exploiting that, right? So knowing that if you buff this, you're actually buffing it twice. Knowing that if you want to go around barrier as well, this is going to ping twice, that sort of thing. And so at first glance, it's very easy to be critical, and I understand the criticism. I'm not saying that the criticism is wrong, but we do have to understand that there's a reason that this card probably costs 7, and it's probably that in testing, it was probably either also fast or also cheaper, and it was busted. And so we got the version that we got. That would be my suspicion anyway. And with that, we are going to move on to the last card from the last reveal before the expansion is finally live. And this is Yordle Contraption. This is a 5-cost slow spell from Bandle City. And this says destroy a landmark or create 2 random multi-region followers in hand. Where this shines, in my opinion, would be in a Bandle Tree deck where you just really want to create multi-region followers. We could also run it in something like a Tristana deck, but I think spending 5 to draw 2, even if there are 2 that are going to help your game plan, I think that's going to be too slow and too expensive for a Tristana deck where you want to be proactive and aggressive. So I think that if we see this find a home, it's basically the Bandle Tree deck. The destroy a landmark might be relevant, but you're spending 5, which feels kind of awful to me, unless there's some weird landmark that enters the meta and starts dominating things, in which case, okay, sure, you like the versatility, but this just stands out to me as a Bandle Tree win con potential inclusion where you're generating the multi-region followers. And that's it. We are at the end of the reveals. So again, reminder, by the time you're watching this, I will potentially be live. I'm going to start streaming tonight. It'll be late in the evening Eastern time, and I'm going to be playing the new set. I have early access as a league partner. So if you want to swing by, see the cards early, catch me live, you can feel free to do so. Obviously, with the expansion tomorrow, we're going to start with some content, share some decks. I don't know if I'm going to do 1 deck at a time, or maybe for the first video, I might just do something where I share deck lists that I want to test, and then we'll jump into gameplay. We'll have to wait and see how it goes, but if you made it this far, I appreciate you nonetheless. Thank you for watching all of these kind of card reveal / reviews, and as always, until next time, may you walk on warm sands.